Welcome to Learn, Create, Sew. In today's video, we're going to go over how to make pleats. Pleats are a way of creating fullness in the fabric that are similar to gathers. However, instead of scrunching the fabric up, we fold it. If you would like to follow along and create a sample of your own, you can visit my website for a free pleating sample guide, which will show you a way to practice making pleats. Sometimes when we're pleating, it doesn't matter the size of the pleats we're making, such as for simple crafts and things like that. However, when you're making garments, a lot of times the size and position of the pleats is extremely important. So today we're going to be using pleating guides to help us make consistent sized and placed pleats. So I'm going to start with sample 1. I have my fabric laying right side up, and I'm going to use this guide to pleat the top edge. You'll notice that at the top there are some arrows. The arrows start where the fabric will be folded and end where I want that fold to be placed. So you'll notice that there are dotted lines and solid lines. You want to make sure that you read your pattern to see what each stands for, but on mine, the dotted line represents the fold. I'm going to mark these lines on my fabric using a Sharpie. I definitely would not do this on an actual project. I'm only going to use it this time to show you how it works on the sample. And then after I show you how it works on this first sample, then I'll show you a way to do the same thing with pins, so you don't have to mark up your fabric like that. But just so that we can have a guide and understand how the pleats work, I'm going to mark on my fabric a green line for every dotted line on my sample. So I'm going to mark a green line here where each of the dotted lines are. That's where I'm going to fold my fabric. And then I'm going to place a red line at every solid line. This is where my pleats are going to stop. And again, if this was my actual garment, I wouldn't do this with Sharpie. If you have a fabric-friendly marking tool, that would be fine. Something that will vanish or wash away. But I'm only using Sharpie for filming purposes, so it's visible on camera. So on these pleats, we're going to fold at the dotted line and bring it over to touch the red line. And we want to make sure we go the direction of the arrows. So all of my folds are going to be pointing this way. I'm going to use the marks I made as a guide to create 3 pleats. This will create evenly spaced, evenly sized pleats. So I'm going to fold my fabric at the green line so that it touches the red line. The fabric that lies in between my 2 marks will be hidden. So I'm going to fold this over so the green line touches the red line and the fabric in between is hidden. And now I'll pin that in place. And I'm going to repeat the process for the other section. So I'm going to take my fabric and fold it so that the green line touches the red line. The fabric in between should be hidden. It's now 3 layers thick, and I'll pin it in place. And let's do that again one last time. Fold it at the green line to meet the red line, hiding the fabric in between. Notice all my pleats are going the same direction. And now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and sew this in place. If possible, I like to sew in the same direction as the pleats. I find there's less trouble with the fabric bunching that way. You can also use a stiletto or a tool such as this purple thing to help hold that fabric in place so that it doesn't move when you're sewing. As you sew, you do want to make sure that your fabric stays flat. So if as you feel your fabric, it starts to feel like it's rolling or it's not laying flat, or you notice it's coming up, make sure you stop, put your needle down, adjust as you need to, and then continue sewing. So don't be afraid to stop if you have to. I'm using a 3/8 inch seam allowance here. Some patterns may ask you to baste your pleats in place first, so just make sure you read your instructions of whatever project you're working on and follow the seam allowance that they ask. Once your pleats have been sewn, you can press them. And depending on how you need your pleats to look, you can press them different. You may only need to press in the seam allowance. This will help it to lay flat in the section where you'll be sewing. Or you may need to press down further to make your pleats more dramatic. Just make sure they're following the same line. And you now have nice even pleats. Let's go back and take a look at the second sample for another way to pleat fabric. You'll notice that the second pleating sample is slightly different. The arrows are pointing different directions. This time we're going to have two pleats meeting at the same location. I've seen pleats like this a lot on skirts, and it can be super cute. This time, instead of using our Sharpie to mark our placement, let's do something a little bit different, and let's use pins. This can be a little bit easier to see once you know the basic steps. So just like before, I want to indicate the two different lines that I have. I want to make sure I know my fold line as well as my end line. So this time I'm going to be using two different colors of pins. I'm going to use green pins to represent my fold line, and I'm going to use red pins to represent my end point. So I'm going to start by placing a green pin on the first fold line right here. So at the top edge of my fabric, right where that fold is going to be, I'm going to place a pin perpendicular to the edge right there where the first line is. So just on the edge of my fabric, right here, I'm going to place a little pin. Then I'm going to do that for each dotted line. Okay, I now have a green pin at every fold line. And now I'm going to place a red pin at the end point. I've just been putting the pins on the seam allowance, so now I can slide. I'm going to have this close so I can see the direction. These two meet here, and these two meet here. So I'm going to take the first green pin, that's going to be my fold. And I'm going to fold the fabric at the green pin so that it touches the red pin. So I'm going to take the fabric at the green pin and fold it so that it touches the red pin. And once it's meeting in the correct location, I no longer need that green pin anymore. So I can take it out and use it to hold my pleat in place. So now I can do the same thing again. I'm going to fold the fabric at this pin, and remember I want it to go this way this time. So I'm going to fold the fabric at my green pin, and I want the green pin to touch the red pin. Now you don't want your pleats to overlap here, you just want them to touch. And then I no longer need the green pin, and I can use it to hold the pleat in place. I also no longer need the red pin, and it can be removed. We can see we've now created a different type of pleat here with the two folds pointing towards each other. Let's do the same thing again. These two pins will meet at the red pin. So I'm going to fold at the green to touch the red, fold my fabric back. Remember, the fabric in between the pins will be hidden. I no longer need the green pin, so I'm going to take it out, and I'm going to use it to hold my pleat in place. And I'm going to repeat on the other side, fold at the green pin so that it touches the red pin. And then I can remove that green pin and use it to hold my pleat in place. And the red pin is no longer needed. I've got my pleats, and now I will head to the sewing machine and sew across the top edge. I'm going to use a 3/8 inch seam allowance once again, and don't forget to use your stiletto or sewing tool to help you. If you don't have a stiletto or a purple thing, you can use the back edge of your seam ripper, but just be careful to make sure that you don't poke or snag your fabric with the sharp point. Again, make sure your fabric stays flat as you sew. And as before, now we'll press. You can press just the seam allowance, or you can press further down to make your pleats more dramatic. You can press all the way to the bottom if you like. It just depends on how crisp you like those pleats and how dramatic you want those folds. And here we have our pleats. They turned out super cute, and they really are very simple. If you have a guide for the pleating size, pleats can often be a lot easier than gathers, as long as you keep them the correct size and in the correct place. I hope this tutorial has been helpful for you. We hope to see you again soon at LearnCreateSew. Until next time, happy sewing!